Okay, this isn't a prediction. Think of this as a declassified framework for a crisis that's unfolding as we speak. What we're doing here is unpacking a situation analysis, one designed to help navigate a scenario that could seriously reshape the global landscape over the next 40 days.
So it all starts with one single event, a flashpoint. On February 28, 2026, a joint U.S.-Israeli operation assassinates Iran's supreme leader. Now, in response, Iran declares 40 days of national mourning. And that 40-day window, well, that's the key to absolutely everything that follows.
So here's the map for this briefing. First, we're going to look at why a fundamental line has been crossed. Then we'll follow the money, the financial bleed, to see the systems under stress. After that, we'll decode the 40-day countdown, not as prophecy, but as our analytical clock. We'll identify 5 critical intelligence tripwires you need to be watching, and then finally we'll give you a navigator's frame, a way to process all of this.
All right, Section 1. A line has been crossed. It is absolutely crucial to understand why this is not just another flare-up in the Middle East. This is something fundamentally, and I have to say, dangerously different.
You know, 3 things make this situation pretty much unique in modern history. First, the assassination of a recognized head of state was authorized. Second, the stated goal wasn't just some punitive strike. It was explicitly regime change. And third, Iran didn't just sit there and take it. Within hours, they launched pre-planned, coordinated retaliatory strikes in 9 different countries. That tells us they weren't just reacting, they were prepared.
The military response was, incredibly swift. But the most critical battlefield in this whole scenario isn't being fought with missiles. It's being fought on the financial front. Which brings us to Section 2, the financial bleed.
This quote is really the perfect lens for what's happening. Finance is literally the lifeblood of a civilization. When that flow gets threatened, every other system, we're talking military, food, energy, governance, it all starts to fracture.
And here's the pre-existing condition. The U.S. walked into this conflict with a national debt already closing in on $38.6 trillion. To give you some perspective, that's over $100,000 for every single person in the country. The system was already running hot before a single shot was even fired.
And this is the real pressure point. Over $1 trillion a year just in interest payments on that debt. That's money that's not building anything, not funding research, it's just servicing the loan. And that was the financial reality before we had to add the immense cost of a new war on top of it.
Now here's the accelerant. Iran has disrupted the Strait of Hormuz. That's the choke point for about 20% of the world's daily oil supply. If that disruption holds, you're going to see oil prices surge from around $70 a barrel to over $150. And look, that's not just an oil crisis, it becomes an everything crisis. The cost to transport food, to manufacture goods, even just to heat your home, it would absolutely skyrocket.
Okay, so let's move to Section 3, the 40-day countdown. And let me be clear, this is not about prophecy. It's about a pattern. It's a historical pattern that shows us how systems behave when they're under extreme, sustained pressure.
Across so many historical traditions, the number 40 represents a complete threshold period. Think about it. 40 years in the wilderness, or the 40 weeks of a human pregnancy. It is the time required for a system under intense stress to either transform into something new or to break apart completely. This is the operational window that we are watching.
This timeline lays out the critical window for us. The strike happens on February 28th. The 40-day mourning period that Iran declared ends on April 9th, and then, just 4 days later, on April 13th, the holiday of Passover begins. This convergence of dates is really significant.
So, we need to read this Passover pattern not just as a religious holiday, but as a historical blueprint for how empires collapse. I mean, the original story describes a sequence of 10 cascading system failures. The water supply goes, then agriculture, then the economy, then governance, and finally, the line of succession. It's a template for how a civilization unravels, one blood flow at a time.
Okay, so how do we track this in real time? Section 4 gives us 5 tripwires to watch. You can think of these as the critical navigational signals on the map, the things that tell you which direction events are actually heading.
So here they are. First, the Hormuz decision. Does Iran formally close the strait?
Second, the Hezbollah decision, does that northern front with Israel fully open up? Third, the U.S. war vote, does Congress officially authorize this conflict? Fourth, China's economic move, are we going to see a deliberate strategic shift away from the dollar? And fifth, who emerges as Iran's new leader and when?
And remember that first tripwire, the Hormuz decision? Well, it connects directly to this financial marker. A formal closure of the strait would dramatically accelerate the timeline toward a $40 trillion U.S. national debt. So why does that number matter? Because that's the threshold where the system shifts from just managing debt to being in what you'd call debt servitude, and that fundamentally changes what a government can and cannot do.
So all of this brings us to our final section, and honestly, it's the most important one, the navigator's frame. How do you take all of this intelligence and use it to orient yourself instead of getting paralyzed by it?
A navigator's job is not to control the storm, it is to read the currents and chart a course through it. So the key question isn't what's going to happen. It's how do I orient myself to what is happening right now?
Well, the briefing suggests 3 very concrete ways to orient yourself. First, secure your own essential blood flows, your household's access to water, to food, and to finances. Second, find a small, trusted community that can provide a steady, sober read of the situation, someone free from the panic. And third, track those 5 markers we just discussed. They are your map as these events unfold.
I want to leave you with this final thought. It really reframes this whole situation. Passover was never about the plagues. It was about what you carried through them and what you built on the other side. The point of navigating a crisis isn't just to survive the challenges. It's about focusing on what you preserve, what you carry through with you, and ultimately what you are prepared to build. That is the navigator's frame.